As I record this, my mother, my birth mother, is in the hospital in Savannah, Georgia, getting ready to go into hip surgery. She fell in her hospital room in Swainsboro, Georgia, and broke her hip, and she was in the hospital for COVID. So I don't know what will happen. She had, COPD and heart and lung problems before all this. I was able to speak to her, and my Aunt Jan is really on top of things. So I'm just saying I could use your thoughts, prayers, holding her up to the light, and the entire Brett family. So thank you for that. She, I will mention, is the cornerstone of my book, which comes out the day this podcast drops, which is November the 12th, 2020. And I am doing a reading about that, and I may read the first couple of chapters, which are about my birth mother. If you hear this in time, you're invited to come to the reading, which is online at Park Road Books. You can just look it up on Park Road Books. And the book is about all these women who formed me, who were formative, like my wife of almost 40 years, my mom, who adopted me and raised me, my sister Liz, my sister Esther, who's a biological sister, my 3 daughters. All these various women that I've known make up the core, or the spine, really, of this book. So my mother and the book, are kind of intimately entwined. It's not a hard flex, as the kids say. They're not two different things. And my head's felt like it's going to explode. But I appreciate your thoughts and prayers. Thanks so much.
I laugh and say, God was there and spinning the wheel and say, oh, we'll give Hopper cancer. We've given her good stuff. She can have cancer.
What is the sound of one man listening? This is Man Listening, a fresh podcast featuring the stories of strong women who bounce back. Man Listening, because every woman deserves to be heard.
Hi, I'm Stuart Watson, and welcome to Man Listening. Today, Mary Hopper. Mary Hopper should have a street named for her in Charlotte. She has been very influential. She has had repeated bouts with cancer, and she is convinced that the cancer she has will eventually take her life. So she lives with that knowledge. And I started, before the tape was really rolling, telling her that someone should name a street or something after her. She contributed to UNC Charlotte and the university area. She has contributed to the planning commission and what the layout of Charlotte looks like, and removing blight and putting great things in its place, and parks and the city transit, and CATS, and the Lynx Line and light rail, and on and on and on have Mary Hopper's fingerprints on it. But she and I talked very, very personally. We were sitting in Latta Park, so I take this sick woman to Latta Park, and it starts raining. And she was a trooper. She's not sick. I mean, I make it sound worse than it is. But without further ado, my friend Mary Hopper.
Where were you born?
At Emory University in Atlanta.
For your mother, you were number what of how many?
Number 1. And they had been married for 10 years before I was born.
And
they waited another 6 years until after the war, when my brother was born.
After World War II?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the Civil War.
And do you have any other siblings other than your brother?
No, they're just the 2 of us.
Okay. And for purposes of understanding Mary, what should I know about your mom and dad?
They were very polite to one another. I never heard them raise their voices to one another. They appeared to be a real love match, and they were in many ways self-contained. They obviously needed one another, although after my dad died, my mother achieved some independence. But they loved one another and loved me and my brother perhaps too much. So I was very, very fortunate in that.
How can you be loved too much?
Well, there was no dysfunction in our family, which is a blessing.
When you say they loved you perhaps too much, what do you mean?
They put their lives on hold for us, for the things that they did not get, being children of my dad should have gone to college in the Depression, came from a large family, there was no money. My mother dropped out of college her sophomore year to marry my dad. So it was important that both my brother and I not just get an undergraduate degree, but get graduate degrees, and we both did. Yes, and on my mother's deathbed, she died here at my house in Dilworth. She said to me and my brother, I always loved you. So I had that kind of framework, but I knew that I never was destined, this is an oddity, I never was destined to be a mother and to raise children. I just did not think I was cut out for that. I don't like babies.
There are plenty of people, Mary, who do not like babies, who grow up to be parents, maybe even good parents. They just do what is required of them.
But I'm not somebody who runs out and holds a baby.
And you were a school teacher, so obviously you dealt with younger kids.
Not younger, college age.
They're still in their teens.
Oh yes.
They're still a protracted adolescence.
Yes, and I've always been somebody that people would tell things to. So the first time one of my students at Queens came and told me she thought she was pregnant, but she had not had sex, and what should she do about it? I thought, I'm not cut out for this. This is not part of my job description.
What did you tell her?
I told her, this was years ago, I said, when you didn't pee on a stick. I said, make an appointment with a gynecologist, and I'm betting by the time you are ready for that appointment, you will have started your period. And she did.
Yeah. So you knew what to say.
Yes, by experience.
Yes, yeah. When you say by experience, what do you mean?
Having gone through pregnancies myself.
You said pregnancies? You had more than one?
Maybe I don't want to talk about this.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine.
No, it was in the years of illegal abortions.
Oh, okay.
Which is, and I had one in Mexico, and that's why I did not abort the daughter that I brought to term.
I get you.
Because I had just gone through that and came back on a rebound and got pregnant and just froze and thought, no, and decided to take the baby to term.
Yeah. If you don't want to talk about that, don't.
Okay.
But if you do talk about it, it helps understand.
Yeah.
And I'm not pressing you about that, but
yeah.
How old were you when you were forced to make that decision?
I was in college.
Okay.
I was in college.
And then with your daughter that you put up for adoption, how old?
It was right as I was graduating from Georgia State.
Okay.
And so I was out spring, and Medina, who always appears to be a very well-regulated young woman, did me the honor of coming to term so I could have her and re-enter for summer school, finish the last credit I needed, and go away to graduate school at Missouri.
In your instance, there were legal factors because this was pre-Roe v. Wade.
A long time.
Right.
Well, but I was in school in Mexico, And I had friends there were Americans who went to medical school in Monterey because their money would go further. And one of them got me with a doctor. And I have no idea what the rules were in Mexico, but obviously they were looser.
Yeah.
So I had a medical abortion.
Did you ever feel unsafe
No.
there? So this was not the quote-unquote back alley or whatever. This was a medical doctor who was performing the procedure.
Yes, and I was in the company of my friend who was the American in medical school and his Mexican medical school friend. So I was in a safe environment. I was in the doctor's office. But because I had gone through that, I just thought, and I guess I was fertile, coming out of, I don't know enough about it. I haven't explored it.
Yes.
But,
And did you name your second daughter Medina? Or
no.
Did you have a name for her?
No.
Okay. And were you able to see her when she was born?
You have to. I went through something that was known as gray market adult. It was handled by my OBGYN and by an attorney. And as I have told Medina, I didn't sell you. I didn't get paid for this.
Did they pay your health care, your medical?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But my parents supported, gave me the money to live on, but the health care was covered.
Yeah. And you say you told her, so obviously you two were reunited at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's a 21st century story. Now that all of us are doing Ancestry, I decided on behalf of my brother, who had become interested in our family history, particularly from the McCall side, I took the Ancestry test so I could maybe link up with some people for him and his 3 children. Knowing that my brother was interested, but knowing him by personality, there was no way on God's green earth he would spit into the tube. So I did that, not knowing what would come out of that at all, having no intention. I had compartmentalized that part of my life. I had made a decision that was good for the child, was good for me. In some ways, probably it was a selfish thing for me because I had a PhD fellowship to Mizzou and I wanted to do that. I, clicked it off. It was just forgotten. Both of my husbands knew, but I never discussed it with my brother. And suddenly, I get through Ancestry, I get this email. I had gotten my results on the 12th of July in 2017, and almost immediately I heard from someone who sent me an email just saying she would like to communicate with me in any way I felt comfortable. And she said, but I can tell you this was the best birthday gift I ever got.
And so the way she wrote that, did she pretty much make it plain that she was your daughter?
Yes and no. Immediately I knew what it was. I had not looked, and I hadn't looked at all the little, I've forgotten how they come up, bubbles or something above there saying what, this is the second cousin, this is what. And it identified, the mother-daughter connection. And I hadn't paid any attention to that. I just was looking at, okay, we're a lot of Scots-Irish, we're a lot of this. She grew up in Chamblee, Georgia, and I had given birth in Atlanta. Her mother had had a hysterectomy from the doctor who had delivered, who was my doctor, didn't deliver the baby. And that's how her mother made the connection to do the adoption. I was looking back at those early back and forths this morning. I said something about intriguing message. And then we just started going back and forth, and we emailed back and forth. And I've shared those with my friends because I'm lucky in that I've got wonderful friends here who know me very well. I think only one of them knew that I had had a child, but they immediately, as they saw us, after a while, they couldn't tell which of us was writing because our verbiage was so similar and our senses of humor were so similar. Years later, she told me that she really labored over that first email, and her husband, who is a bit of a character, had said, maybe just say, I've got 54 Mother's Day cards, where should I send them? And she said, no, she considered for a while saying, do you still have both your kidneys? To which I said later on, when she told me that, I said, if we didn't have DNA proof, I know through that we were mother-daughter.
That's a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
But she writes beautifully, writes more beautifully than I do. And there's so many odd parallels. So a lot of the early back and forth, and we were almost emailing almost daily. We've kind of shifted more to text now. And then ultimately we decided, and it probably was about a month afterwards, it was mid-July, that I would fly up there. But we knew...
Up there?
Up to Brooklyn, up to New York. And I would, take a cab. She had found a wonderful, wonderful place. Actually, the woman got very caught up in the fact, our backstory, because Medina and Adam had gone and put a bottle of single malt in there for me and some other stuff, so that when I got there, I guess I could have a drink.
Are you a Scotch drinker?
Yes, very much so.
So
she's a bourbon drinker.
She knew that about you.
Yeah, we had talked back and forth.
Well, that's very thoughtful.
Yeah, and so Cassie, the woman that owned it, was a VBRO. Yeah.
VRBO.
VRBO. I always get those letters wrong. And it was an exquisite place. And it was in Carroll Gardens. And Medina, she'd chosen that because she thought it would give me a Brooklyn feel, which I think was important so I could understand her milieu. And she came straight from work that night. I flew in midday. She came straight from work, and we went to supper, and she'd chosen a tapas place that is one of the best restaurants, but it is over in Brooklyn. And, we didn't...
Is that the first time you laid eyes on her?
Yeah.
And what struck you about her when you first saw her?
She slew foot like me.
What does that mean?
Your feet kind of turn out.
It's a little bit like bow-legged?
No, your feet turn out.
Oh, okay,
it
not your
means
knees.
You're not a good runner. You need to be pigeon-toed to be a good runner.
Yes. So
they said the best quarterbacks were pigeon-toed.
Yes, but this is the opposite.
Yeah,
a broad stance.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was uncomfortable for her. It probably was more uncomfortable for her. We were going into unknown territory. What were we going to were we going to, in something we said to one another, offend one another or be so different? She had to verify that I was liberal. If I was conservative, she was not to contact me.
That's so funny.
So evidently, she didn't tell me that, but it opened up conversations. And when in her first long email to me, she said that she had always felt like an air fern
Now, what do you think she meant?
She was rootless, although she had worked through in her mind that brought her a certain amount of freedom, because it let her forge her own personality. But she always was different, obviously, from the family she was adopted into. And
When she said that to you, how did you feel when you heard
it
that?
made me very sad, probably because I'm an Aquarian and I'm the quintessential Aquarian and believe in all kinds of odd things. I was sure that we connected at this time for a reason.
What do you mean by at this time?
You know, before I died. You know.
Because you were in your 70s when
Oh,
she
yes. Oh,
got
yes.
in touch with you.
Yeah, it was. I was 76 at the time, so it was important for us to connect, because if she needed that connection, she needed time to get to know me, and she needed time to get to know my family and my family of choice, my friends here. And she has been able to do that. They have taken her into their hearts, and my brother has as well. So it's really funny how we kind of bounced off each other.
Yeah.
And as I'd said earlier, I was born at Emory. That's where she went to undergraduate.
Ah. And what did she study?
She studied English.
So you're both very intelligent women, and you're both very studied too. I mean,
And she did a junior year in the UK. I did a summer in Mexico, the ill-fated one. Mine was a bit more adventurous, perhaps. We had that British connection. Her first husband was a Brit. My second husband was a Brit. Later on, we realized that we both loved Iceland. I mean, how weird is that?
Yeah.
Now, she's never been to Mexico, and it makes me sad that I won't be able to take her to show her what I love of Mexico. But she...
why can't you?
At this point, you know, who knows when we can travel again and what health I'll be in, or whether I'd be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And-
you seem good
Yeah,
today.
yeah, you know, I'm not tumor burdened.
Did you have surgery for cancerous tumors?
Oh, multiple,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And what kind of cancer did you have?
The first I had was Merkel cell carcinoma, which is it's a skin cancer. There are only about 2,000 cases a year, although that number may have gone up. They may now be better able to diagnose it. I'm lucky in that there is a wonderful doctor at Levine Cancer who is a specialist in that, and he before I would have had to have gone to the University of Washington in Seattle to find a specialist.
But I should say, you have your hair. You have
Yes.
a good stand of hair there.
Oh, yes.
And your
We
color
refer
is...
to it as Kegel hair.
Yes. And your color is good.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
your skin is clear.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and I'm going through immunotherapy now. I've lost track. I will be resuming radiation. I've done multiple radiations. Oh, and then I got breast cancer, but it was just a stage 1. That one was an easy one. But
None are easy.
yeah, by the time they found the Merkel, it was a stage 4. And I did take 1 round of chemo with it. I lost my hair, but it came back exactly the same.
Wow. Now, where in this whole process of being treated for cancer were you contacted by your daughter?
It was probably about 2 years into it.
Oh, so you already had been diagnosed and were being treated.
And I did not tell her about the cancer until we met I told her sometime in that weekend about it.
How did she take that?
Well, she laughed and said, "Oh my God, you had cancer in your leg, and here I made you take the baton death march with me." You know, because we were running and taking transit and walking all over Brooklyn so she could show me parts of Brooklyn, which I love. I mean, I find it wonderful and invigorating, and you know, and then she just was mortified.
Now, after the face-to-face meeting, the night of the tapas, how long was the conversation nervous? And how long did it take the two of you to kind of feel each other out and establish this sense of...
No time. I think at one point I had said to her, she had said, "There's nothing that I can learn about you that will be," I've forgotten how she put it, "make me dislike you," or something like that. And I thought, oh no, wait. You know, I have very strong bitch tendencies. Trust me, I will offend. I mean, I always say when people say, "Oh, I know who you are," I said, did I do something to offend? You know, because there is always a strong likelihood.
Yes.
But she and I just fell into a very natural. But remember, we had been exchanging. We'd sent each other packets. She had sent me writing that she had done in high school. I mean, really beautiful. We had been conversing on a pretty intimate level already. Mm-hmm. So it was just like we were friends. We'd always talked. Yeah. So, you know, but when you put it in, I mean, it's such a 21st century kind of thing. The ancestry and the emails. I think I was the one that said it. Could have been her. That, you know, I've always known you. Mm-hmm. So it's now we're going through a phase where now occasionally she'll say, "Well, we're not alike at all," you know, on something, and I keep saying to her, particularly in the early, "You have to understand, I'm the new toy in the box. So I'll be more interesting to you than I might be long term."
As you've gone through multiple cancers, we don't know if this is the last one or if there'll be, 20 more or no more. We don't know. What do you want your daughter and other people to know about you, whether this happens in 3 months or in 30 years?
Well, I think particularly my local circle of friends who have been, they've become groupies with my doctors. I think they don't, they're very offended that they can't go see my doctors now. I laugh and say, "You're not going to be with me. You're going because you've got a crush on him." But, they understand that it's important for me, like Les, my husband, to be optimistic about this. That I'm not going to moan and groan about why did God give me this? Because I laugh and say, God was there and spinning the wheel and say, somebody said, "Oh, we'll give Hopper cancer," and he said, "Oh, okay, we've given her good stuff. She can have cancer, and I really feel that way. But I may have also gotten that. I mean, I feel like it's imperative that I live up to the standard of my husband and his courage in dealing with a cancer that was significantly more invasive and more devastating on his lifestyle than this has been. I've got to show that same courage. I remember one of my cousins saying, "I never thought I would see the day when I would say I'm ready to die." Or an aunt that I was close to say, you know, I'm ready to go. And my mother knew she was dying. So I've seen it. And in the case of my husband, I was there. Luckily, a hospice nurse was there. And I just remember seeing a surprised look on his face. And the nurse said, he's dead. And I said, what are you talking about?
Do you want your daughter to be your caregiver at some point?
No, I hope she won't have to. I mean, I hope I'll go. When I go, I hope I'll go quickly.
That you'll have caregivers and that she won't have to stay here for months?
She's gone through that with her father.
With her dad, her adopted dad.
Her adopted dad. And she was very close to him. And I think that still is a very vivid memory to her. I don't want her to have to do that.
You all seem to have forged a relationship healthier than many mothers and daughters who grew up together. Is that because you don't have the baggage of a teenager saying, I hate your guts, and they can parachute and miss over the whole messiness of adolescence and puberty? Or is it just because you work at it?
I was lucky I can come in and, like I said, be the new toy in the toy box. And she doesn't have to live with me day in and day out and deal with my moods, which anybody who ever lived with me can tell you it can be ominous. On the Moan case, I'm pretty optimistic, but then I can be bitchy and whiny and, all those unpleasant things. And I try to shield her from that.
Yeah. When
I realize that I'm getting on her nerves, I just back away and we don't communicate for a day or two. I can tell. Because I worry about what she worries about. I don't fully understand right now what the pressures are on her. Her husband worked for a company that did events. Well, that went the way of the buffalo. And so he's furloughed. She, of course, is working from home, but...
The buffalo came back. The events will probably come back in some form.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And she is not the emotional exhibitionist I am.
What do you mean by that?
She doesn't. I share things. I talk about this. I talked about this with my friends. I talk about the things that I'm experiencing. And once I've talked about it with one, I may share it with others. And she feels a little bit uncomfortable because that's not the way she is.
I'm not going to keep you out here in the rain all afternoon. I want to ask you a couple things. One is, how grateful are you that your daughter reached out?
Enormously grateful. And I hope she is equally, although I'm sure at times I exasperate her.
Yeah. And you are going in this afternoon for one treatment. You seem to feel great. You look great. What is your prognosis?
Oh, Merkel cell will get me. It's just a matter of when. In fact, my poor breast cancer people kind of roll their eyes. They say, you need to be doing mammograms. Stage 1's not going to get me, Y'all are scanning me every 3 months. If anything happens up there, that's how you found it. We'll work it. No. Consequently, I also won't do colonoscopies. Okay,
Yeah. How does it change the way you view the day-to-day when you understand there's a finite number of these days?
I have a terrible flaw right now. I am squandering the two things I have the least of, money and time. And I should be more productive, particularly with the time. I went through a thing when I cleaned up tried to clean up in my house, and I've gotten slack about that now. I need to get back on that, because at some point nobody needs to have to come in and clean up after me. I've purged a lot of things. I've always been perhaps too open with some things, and this was the one thing I was less open about. I mean, when the Observer said they wanted to do an exhaustive thing on Les going through and how we went through the cancer, I gave them total access. And my friends opened up, and my brother opened up. And even going back years ago, when I had my tubes tied, somebody from the Charlotte News called, and I was interviewed, in an article about making a choice on that, and I think, Jesus, Hopper, is there nothing that's, that's private with you?
You talked to me about your abortion in Mexico.
Yeah, and I've talked about the abortions, but there are still things that I haven't unpacked in all of this.
But what I'm wondering for you is, when you were a Republican, were you pro-abortion rights?
Sure, yeah.
And how did you make that case?
You could, in those days, there was room for feminists who believed in, who were liberal on things. You could still be there. And then systematically, with Jesse Helms having so much control, the people around him, and our first signal was, you can't be a delegate to the 76 convention.
Did you draw upon your experience as having had a safe medical abortion when you spoke to the issue or advocated for the issue?
I did not. I have been more of an activist because of my personal history. I'm not sure that I'm a good advocate for Planned Parenthood, because they'd say, well, you had a baby, So abortion rights has never been, I've been supportive of abortion rights, but that's never been the major thing that I have taken on. It was more, everything was under the rubric of Equal Rights Amendment, which was more access to employment. And I don't know if you know or not, but it used to be that North Carolina was one of the few states that if you were a married woman, if you owned property before you were married, once you were married, your husband controlled the property and could control any rents that came out of it. So those were the kind of things, and access to credit. So I never was on the front line on abortion rights.
So if we want to name a section of road in Charlotte after Mary Hopper, should it be Freedom? Should there be a little section of Freedom? Is that the most appropriate?
I don't know. No, it may be something over here in Dilworth.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say thank you for your service to the city of Charlotte.
Oh, I set up the Forrest Gump of that and of the women's movement, and I need to write a lot of that shit down.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your time with me this afternoon.
Yeah, and if the segment that talks about the abortion in Mexico, if that works best in there, that's fine, because I think that explains why I didn't abort again.
Yeah.
Oh, because here I was back in the States, I'd have to look for an illegal abortionist.
Well, you call it, oversharing or a lack of filter or whatever. I call it courage. That's a certain amount of courage
Well, a friend tells me, and I don't remember this, and I usually remember a lot of things, of being at my house. I guess it was after I was first separated and before Les moved in with me. And a group of us there, and we were all talking, and everybody in the room had had an abortion. So people need to understand that. And, you know, it was easy for me because I was a white woman, you know, and could piece together the money to do that. But I remember when I was on the faculty at Queens, they had just started legal abortions, and one of the women I think she was in the admissions office, and she knew she didn't want to have that baby. I mean, she was married, and the husband concurred, but she had to prove that she was mentally or would be mentally unstable, even to get a legal abortion. So I don't want us to go back to that. So maybe if there's some value in my telling the story, maybe that I just don't know if having carried a baby to term undercuts my validity as that messenger.
It's not a message, it's just your experience.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any regrets for the abortion.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. I was in Mexico, and it was done medically. Yeah. You know, there were no coat hangers.
Yeah. Thank you for your honesty and your candor. I appreciate it.
Mary seems to be doing well. She and I trade emails and phone calls, and she's still in touch with her daughter. And I never even mentioned she and I are from the same hometown. She was born there, and I grew up there in Albany, Georgia. So it's hard to get us off of telling old Albany stories. But Mary, thank you so much for your time.
Man Listening is a production of Unmediated LLC in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. Allison Andrews at Andrews Creative and Rachel Clapp-Miller are developmental producers. Sally Higgins at Higgins & Owens tries to keep us legal. Our music is A Day at the Park by the group Pictures of the Floating World. Your announcer is Catherine Smith. That's me. Please go to our Patreon page. You'll find us at patreon.com. Look for Man Listening, one word, no spaces. We hope you'll join us by becoming a member. A small investment can raise up the conversation. If you want exclusive member merch like a t-shirt, we can arrange that too.
As a way of saying thank you to the people who have supported Man Listening as a concept and a podcast from the very beginning, I've been shipping out dozens, even hundreds of books, signing them, and trying not to get carpal tunnel, but I can't thank you enough. That's a way of saying I cannot thank you enough for supporting this venture from the very start.
Don't forget to support us at Patreon. We believe one voice can change the conversation. Click the subscribe button, and next week you'll hear.
But the two of them together, their parenting style was, you weren't good enough for God's love, so you damn sure aren't good enough for my love.
That's next week on Man Listening. Thanks.